Hello, everybody. This is Crossing Crown Radio and the Gospel Truth Podcast, and I'm Mike Robinson, your host. So glad that you're with us today. Got an exciting guest today. I got John Wilkinson. He's a YouTube apologist. He's actively engaging people in the public arena and social media. Information on his ministry and his outreach are posted in the description on this interview, and you can see him at Atomic Apologetics and at the Council. John, greetings and welcome to our channel. Where are you originally from, and now where do you reside?
Hi. Thanks for having me, and I really do appreciate being on here, Mike. So I'm originally from Boston. I was born in Boston.
Wow.
But I was raised, in. So I don't have the Boston, I park my car in Harvard Square
Right.
accent. So I grew up in the Southern Oregon area. And so then from there, though, I currently reside in Washington State, which is, and I've been here since about 2003. Yeah, 2003 was when I moved up here. And not long after that, I met my wife through the internet. And we actually found out that we lived only maybe like 16 blocks from each other. And so, it was pretty cool. So then the wonderful thing is that, we got together and we haven't been separate since. And then about a year and a half later, we got married and then we've been together ever since. So it's been great.
You can definitely see God's sovereign hand in that. Now, I lived in Southern California, Hawaii, then pastored a church in Las Vegas, and then came out here to Texas and pastoring a church out here in a small town just outside Dallas-Fort Worth. So I've not been to Washington. It's one of the few states I haven't been to. But you read in the newspapers, at least in Christian media, how bad it is for Christians in Oregon and Washington. Is it kind of exaggerating the media, or how do you see that in your life?
Well, there is, in Seattle primarily is the problem. I mean, you got liberals running amok over in Seattle area. Not to mention you got Jay Inslee, which is our governor, who is running for president. And his only platform right now is global warming. That's it. That's his whole entire platform. So it's ridiculous. And so, anyways, if you did watch the last debates, he was a complete joke. And kind of guy where I had not much respect for the guy at all. And so when it comes to like Seattle, it's out of control. And it's just ridiculous. I live on the western side of the Puget Sound, so it's a little more sane over here. So either you can stay as far west to the Pacific Ocean as you can, or either that travel to the east side, but stay away from some universities over there because it gets pretty liberal over there too. But for the most part, the only real major liberal leftist kind of thinking is mostly in the Seattle, King County area. So it is what it is. So,
Gotcha.
But the weather is beautiful. The weather is always beautiful over here. We love it. It rains probably like 8 months out of the year, but the summers are great. All 2 weeks of it.
Amazing. Well, better you than me, although, everybody likes different types of weather. I was in Hawaii for a while, and the place I lived, it never got colder than 70 degrees, never got warmer than 89. So it was kind of a little bit of an earthly paradise. But, I'm really happy myself out here in Dallas. And obviously with meeting your wife the way you did, you must know that you're right where God wants you geographically, at least at this point.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is something where God has really had His hand in this, and it's been just a complete blessing to be able to be up here and to meet her along with her family. They're all just a godly family, and it's been an amazing experience to be a part of that.
I don't know if you've ever done a video on that testimony, that aspect of your testimony, but that would be fascinating for a lot of people and perhaps could help a lot of people. That some folks get single in their 30 or whatever age and they start really freaking out. But
Yeah.
God's sovereign, He's in control.
Absolutely. Yeah, I never thought about making it into. I mean, I do have a testimony and all, but it doesn't really touch into that aspect of it. But there is a lot of background in my testimony, and then it kind of ties in with how God brought my wife and I together and how we connected. And so it's really interesting. I think you can actually find my testimony on the Bible Thumping Wingnut page.
Okay.
And there's a particular podcast from the council. It used to be called the Council of Google Plus, and I think it's just a testimony of me along with like 3 other guys, and I'm around the 50-minute mark, I believe, or something like that. So you can probably find me there. But it's I ramble on for a good half hour. So, but
we'll get to some of that in a little bit too on this show. But yeah, I was just mentioning that it's such a unique way that you met your wife and how close she was. If she was open to you, putting that out there in public, some folks may not be, but if they were, I think it would really touch a lot of people that, sometimes we don't trust God's sovereignty and we just want to, take things in our own hands and worry and worry and worry. And so it might help some folks, just that little part of your life story. Let's get into apologetics. What do you find, you've been doing a lot of apologetic work. You're talking to guys all over the country, Christian, non-Christians, including the Bible Wingnut. Those folks are great. What do you find is some of the most pressing intellectual challenges to Christianity in America and the West in general? What do you think, in your own opinion?
As far as Christianity goes, I would say there are too many Christians out there that simply don't know how to articulate the gospel. I think that's one of the main issues is being able to actually just articulate it, simplify it if you have to, and to be able to share it, with others, and how to tie it in with most conversations. I think that's one of the problems that a lot of people are always having is to be able to whatever conversation you're having, to be able to tie it in. What's really great, if you're aware of Andrew Rappaport from Striving for Eternity, he used to have this little segment that was called what was the segment called? I can't remember. But anyways, basically what you would do, you would give him a topic and he would try to, any topic. I mean, just, you can be so random where you could say, let's talk about broccoli. And then he would try to tie the word broccoli. He would try to get the topic of broccoli and try to get the gospel in there somehow. And it would be so funny because sometimes, you would try to stump him and he would be really great with just trying to hit it just right and just share the gospel what topic you gave him. So it was always kind of a neat challenge for him. And it's a learning tool for us too, because we can actually kind of say, well, how can I get the gospel out, with this topic that I'm talking with this other person next to me or whatever. So yeah, I would say all in all, I mean, back to your original question, is that yeah, we as Christians, our major problem is not being able to actually articulate the gospel in a concise and quick way. And I know a lot of people will say, well, I mean, the gospel is repent and trust in Jesus. And I think that's probably the most efficient answer I can always think of, because it basically kind of boils down to, well, repentance. Well, why do I need to repent? Well, because you're a sinner. Plain and simple. We're all sinners. We're all broken. And and then of course, trust in Jesus, is the second part of it. And I think that that is a better way of or a clearer picture of what we can do when it says repent and believe. I think believe is also synonymous with just simply trusting, putting all your full weight on Christ and the accomplished work of the cross. And I think that is what we need to be really clear of. So
I think you're right. I think we might have less culture wars and less division in this country if Christians were actively doing their job, and like you said, even knew how to do their job in such a concise, cogent way, like you just put. It would really help. I know God's sovereign, and he's the one that saves souls, and yet he also ordains a means. So, and I think obviously, and we'll get into this probably a little bit, the churches are at fault too. The pastors, sermon after sermon, the, self-help, therapeutic stuff, 5 ways to have a better family, 3 ways to strengthen your marriage, 4 ways to be prosperous. Week after week after week, these folks are getting it, and so the gospel is just barely, if it's tacked on at all at the end, so it's kind of sad. And like you said, it's reflected, unfortunately, in a lot of the Christians' lack of being able to communicate the gospel. So I must agree with you. I hadn't thought of it that way. I'm always thinking about the external threats, but that's an important one right there.
Well, I mean, you can always apply you can always, when you see the external threats that are going on, whether it be the heresies that are creeping into the actual church, or just simply the non-Christian worldview. I think that that's the biggest solution that we can offer is the gospel. I mean, and that's what it comes down to. So
it is. It's the power of God into salvation. Either that's true or it's not. And I know it's true. I got saved in a 7-Eleven store without ever thinking about religion or wanting to be a Christian. So
praise
just
God.
The power of the gospel, so it can be that fast and that quick, because that's the power therein. How did you get involved in theology and apologetics, maybe specifically? Because there's not that many people involved percentage-wise, although today versus, say, 25 years ago when there was just a handful of apologists, now there's tens of thousands, but still a small number percentage-wise. How did you get involved in theology and apologetics? Why couldn't you just be sitting on the pew as an average Christian?
Yeah, I'm not average.
Good answer.
But no, it's kind of funny because I'm thinking back as far as what the timeline was, and I would say that most of my life I've been just an average Christian, but it wasn't until I started moving up here to Washington, and I basically what happened was I got involved with getting in touch with Matt Slick. Matt Slick is the apologist and theologian from carm.org. And so I got a hold through him, through all places. I got a hold through him through Second Life. You know what that was?
No.
Second Life is kind of a virtual world where basically you create a character, and then you can go to travel in these little rooms, basically, or these communities. And so basically you're just an individual, and basically you can just talk to people. It's almost like Skype, but it's like it's like in a virtual computer simulation. It's really weird. So anyways, Carm had their own Second Life account, and so you can join in and there. And then I was just one night just hanging out by myself, and then all of a sudden Matt Slick jumps on, and him and I just started talking, and just kind of communicating with each other, and and from there it kind of went on to a pretty good relationship, and I've even actually had Matt come to my church for a men's retreat.
Wonderful.
About 4 years ago, and
now,
it was really good.
When you met Matt in that room, were you aiming to start, growing in theology and apologetics and such, or was that kind of already starting to be instilled in you, or was he one of the catalysts that kind of really started it?
A little bit of both. I think within me, I've always been kind of argumentative, and and so it's kind of a natural thing for me. I don't know why, but I just wanted to kind of pick not pick a fight, but just sort of stir the pot a little bit, and just sort of get people to think, when it comes to why they believe. There's a lot of people who know what they believe. Okay, they believe, there's a lot of Christians out there who know it, but they don't understand why,
Right.
and they don't know the background of it. What does sanctification mean? What does the imputation of Christ mean? What is, versus the what's the other word? Anyway, what's the expiation, or just all the other the words that we hear, all the Christianese that we may heard, but we don't really apply it, or we don't break it down, and I think that that's always something I've always felt that the church needs, especially within my church. The church that I go to is a community church. And so we have a lot of people from different backgrounds. Some people came from a Catholic church. We have some people who came from a Mormon background. And we also have some people that come from one of those hyper charismatic churches. So it's always been a challenge for me to help them understand, what exactly are the essentials of the faith, and being able to determine whether something is the essentials of the faith or a non-essential of the faith, and then being able to understand what all that means as far as why do you believe it?
Do you find those folks, John, in your church open when you start talking about them, whatever their different backgrounds, some of these, bottom issue theological truths from the Bible, or do they tend to listen?
Some do and some don't.
Okay.
Some are pretty stubborn when it comes to what they want to believe. And I mean, I've even had some people tell me, I don't need to know theology or apologetics. All I need is the Jesus and the Bible. And my first reaction or my first question to them is, who is Jesus? And then the moment they start talking, that's a theology. That's you're doing theology. You're doing apologetics. Yeah. So, but then there are other people who I've taught in my Sunday school class where I talked about apologetics and theology, and there were some people who were just completely open to it, and they're really blessed by it. But you figure out who's more sensitive than others, and you just kind of go sway with the punches. You just kind of see what's out there. And so you don't want to offend anybody, but at the same time you want to get them thinking, and so sometimes that can be a challenge, but you do what you can.
Did Matt Slick physically move recently? I heard something on one of his channels that he might be moving to, was it Arizona area?
Yeah, that has not happened yet. And the reason why is because his wife has been going through a lot of medical issues. She's on some serious, she has a lot of conditions and a lot of medical problems. And so the reason why they're moving down to Arizona is for the weather. Basically, it'll be better for her to be in that hot, dry weather, which will be really helpful and all that. So, but at the moment, the reason why they had to delay it is because if they would have moved now, they would lose their all their insurance. So basically, what happened is that now they got to wait until around the end of the year to go ahead and actually make the move. That way, they can apply for a new insurance when they're down in Arizona. That way, they can get the coverage down there. Otherwise, they lose all their coverage if they did it in the middle of the year, which is ridiculous. I mean, you would think that the states would be able to.
Yeah, didn't Obama fix that? I encourage all of our viewers to pray for the Slicks, because that is a very challenging, difficult situation. He's a warrior. He's done so much for the body of Christ, across the board. Keep him in prayer.
Yeah, he's definitely an amazing man, godly man, and just a complete blessing for me in my life, along with, Andrew Rappaport from Striving for Eternity, Anthony Silvestro also. And there's so many great godly men out there that are willing to sit down with you and be able to just kind of talk with you and to be able to help you understand theology and apologetics and just so many doctrines and just whatever questions that you have, or any kind of worries or concerns that you have personally, that they'll listen. I mean, they'll listen, and I get, sometimes I'll get even a personal phone call from Andrew or something, and they're just wonderful, godly people, and I love them.
It shows in your ministry there. They've poured into you, and you're pouring out to the folks that are lost and the other Christians. So it's really wonderful to see that kind of discipleship, if you will. And with the tools that we have these days, it's just a blessing to be able to be befriended and mentored to some extent by Matt Slick and all the other guys. And, I noticed Matt over the years, watching a lot of his videos and reading a lot of his works, he's really good with the aggressive new atheists. And that's our next question. Do you think the new atheists, so many of them are very aggressive and belligerent and bombastic. Do you think they're having a large influence on the popular culture?
To be honest, I think that they are falling away. I think they realized that the new atheist movement, which was, Lawrence Krauss and what is the other guy?
Dawkins.
Yeah, Richard Dawkins, and this other guy, man, what was his name?
Sam Harris.
Yeah, Sam Harris. Thank you. Yeah, Sam Harris was part of it. So anyways, you got those guys, and I think they're realizing that what they're doing is pretty much a one-string banjo kind of thing, where they just don't know. They're making themselves look pretty foolish, and so I think they're realizing that, and now they're kind of just backing off. Sure, they'll show their true colors every now and then, but for the most part, though, I think the new atheist movement is dying. I think right now there's more postmodern, skepticism that seems to be growing more and more in today's universities, and nowadays it's not so much aggressive, but it's more pragmatic. Just sort of like, who cares, and those are the people that are really hardest to reach out. I've always been taught that the people who get really offended with the gospel message, the people who get really irate and angry at you, those are the people who are this close from being saved. It's the people who get really angry like that are so close from getting saved. They're just so convicted, But what's really sad are people who are just flippant, or that just postmodern, they just shrug their shoulders and say, I don't care. Those are the people that I want to reach out to and help, because those are the ones I found who are most in danger when it comes to the wrath of God, because they don't care. They just shrug their shoulders, and they're apathetic, when it comes to what the gospel has to say, and what the history of the church and Christ, and it's just it breaks my heart when I come across those kind of people who just say, I don't care, whatever.
Yeah, they're harder to reach, and the new atheists that are very aggressive and pugnacious, like you said, they're tipping their hand. It's a tell, if you will, in poker, that they know that God exists, and that they know that God exists, and that's why they hate him so much. But they're close,
Right.
Romans
1.
Yeah, Romans 1 right there. I had a guy, man, this guy was in my life. He was really a mean-spirited guy, very cantankerous, atheist. And I'd talk to him, and try to be patient with him. Oh, Mike, you'll never convince me. You'll never convince me, blah, blah, blah. So after 6 months, I hadn't seen him. And I had about 6 conversations with him. And 6 months later, he comes to me, Mike, you won't believe it. I got saved. I go, really? Yeah. And now I'm teaching apologetics at this church down the street.
Amazing.
Yeah. So I think you're spot on with that. And so I have a lot of those guys comment on my Facebook and my YouTube channels, and I try, and some of our team try to contact all of them. And, even if they're nasty and mean, we try to look through that and give them the truth. So, I really appreciate your work, Matt Slick's work, the truth from the guys from the Bible Wingnut, all these guys. I think they're having influence. And so what I saw as a guy who was in apologetics in the 80s and 90s, and like I mentioned earlier, there was only a handful of guys in those days. And then to see what the new atheists did, what they did was they kicked the beehive, the hornet's nest, if you will, and boom, all of a sudden there's tens of thousands of apologists out there instead of just a handful.
Well, I think one of the things that blew up, what I would say, is the presuppositional apologetics position. I think once you read works from Greg Bonson or Cornelius Van Til, or any of the more recent ones like Seitan Bruggencate, if you watch How to Answer the Fool, and you can watch it free on YouTube. Side made it available for free, and I watched that movie or that documentary probably I've watched it like 8 times, and I get something out of it every time, and it's just a really amazing style of apologetics, because it really gets down to the brass tacks, about how do you know the things that and how is that connected, with God, and just the fact that Romans 1, again, it kind of goes back to that. We all know that God exists. You just choose to suppress it, and you just are you're fighting against it. It's all you're doing. You're kicking against the goads. And, I just find that once you tell them that, and they're, because, basically, whenever they're questioning you, or they're asking these angry questions, they're not angry at you. They're angry at God, yeah. And for an atheist to presuppose, oh, wait. How's that go again? It goes something like, all atheists have to presuppose God in order to deny God. And so it's so true. It's so true. And so I always thought that was a great way of looking at it, is because, yeah, I mean, they know it just comes to truth. I mean, it comes so much into light, when it comes to Romans 1, that
they all know. They know, but they are fighting against it. They're suppressing it, and they can just continue on with their sin. And so
Yeah, Cy
it's
doesn't
always
play any games. Cy doesn't play any games. He goes right for the jugular. And like you said, anti-theism presupposes theism. You're done at the start. The minute you start arguing, it's over.
exactly.
I love it about it too. And the proof and the evidence is so powerful. It just goes to the moon and back, and there's no denying it. I think Bonson said something like, everything is evidence for God's existence. And that's true. Almost like your friend was able to take almost anything and bring it back to the gospel. Bonson could take anything, whether it's Santa Claus or a rose or the universe, and bring it back to proving that God exists from it. So that's a really powerful argument. And those guys out there doing that is just really wonderful. What is the most outrageous thing that you've seen or heard from a non-believer in some of these dialogues? Does anything come to mind, whether it's a personal exchange or on the council?
Oh, very much. We've had some pretty doozies there.
Yeah,
the biggest one that I'm most famous for is Matt Slick was talking with this one atheist. Well, actually, I think he was a deist. Or agnostic. I think he was agnostic. He didn't claim to be an atheist. He just said agnostic. And Matt asked him a very simple question. Do babies exist? That's it. And this guy hemmed and hawed and just sort of like, well, that's debatable. And I was like, you've got to be kidding. And I lost it. I mean, I feel so bad that I just went ahead and I lost my temper right that evening. And so I went right in. I go, you've got to be kidding. You will do anything you can to suppress the truth, including denying that babies exist. It is ridiculous. Yeah. And so it was just a funny thing. And so Andrew Rappaport actually has that audio of that conversation, and he plays it on and off every now and then. And it's just so funny on Apologetics Live. We play that every now and then, and you can hear me just lose it. I mean, I'm just like, there's no babies.
Right. How they have to go in their worldview. If you press them a little bit, I can't even tell you a baby exists. Babies, I'm not sure. It's just that, and that's foolishness. They may call Christianity foolishness, like the Bible says they will, but obviously, what's really foolish is the idea of denying God and then denying, the undeniable. It's a really amazing. We touched on this earlier, John, but what do you think is the state of the church in America? I know sometimes it's kind of hard to gauge because you're up in Washington, I'm in Texas, and you read things, you see things, and of course, a lot of what we see is some of the dramatic, crazy people out there. Some of the folks that we would never want to endorse, like Olstein and those folks. But there are a lot of, obviously, pastors preaching the word faithfully around the country in their church. But overall, what do you think? Because you've been talking to so many people over the years. How do you gauge that?
Wow. I would say overall, the church is in desperate danger right now. I think right now we are seeing so much wrong thinking within the churches, whether it be the prosperity gospel, whether it be the hyper charismatic goofiness that you see at Bethel, or even just recently with the critical race theory movement that's been going on. Basically making all white people feel ashamed of slavery, and basically we have to acknowledge that we're as guilty as the people who had slaves, and how, you know, all we have is white privilege and stuff, and it's so ridiculous, and it's creeping into so many different churches. Even right now, currently the SPC is dealing with this. J.D. Greer, the president of the SPC, just wrote a letter or an article just recently saying basically, you know, we need to acknowledge that our white privilege is a problem, you know, basically. And so it's so ridiculous. So anyway, I think right now, the pastors and elders of most churches now are not doing their jobs. They are not knowing how to protect their flock from the wolves that are creeping in. And that is just a huge issue that I have. And I'm not, you know, pointing to my church. I'm just talking about, you know, churches in general. You know, with the churches like Joel Osteen, people are still going to go to that, and they're just going to walk in there blindly, not realizing what, you know, what lack of gospel that he's bringing in. But my heart is for like the small churches within my town or so, that, you know, there's a particular church that we have down not far from my home, and it's got a woman pastor, you know, and it just breaks my heart to know that, you know, these people are not holding the scriptures up to a higher standard, you know, and they're not following what it says, that, you know, that men are supposed to be under the authority of the church. And it's not because it's a cultural thing, but it's because it's a creation thing. It's actually how God set it up. And so when people, when there are churches that seem to have a weak pastor or elder, or either that they have a woman pastor, you know, under the authority, over the authority of a man, I think it's more harmful for the church. I mean, I think one of the biggest things I have a heartbreaking moment of when it comes to so many churches is knowing that they are going down the road of a heretical movement, and I can just tell that like in Revelations when Jesus says, "I'm going to remove my lampstand," you know. That is what breaks my heart, to know that Christ has to remove his lampstand from these churches because they are not following, you know, his instructions on how to run a church, you know. And it's just heartbreaking to know that kind of stuff. And so,
yeah, I think a lot of the pastors are trying to copy what seems to work in the larger seeker-friendly churches. Well, it worked for them, you know, so it's going to work for me. So they compromise these things. And what I try to tell my people, and what I raise my kids to do, is to focus on the aspects of the intellect, the aspects of the spiritual, and the aspect of the emotional, not just focus on one or the other. But I wanted them emotionally tied to Jesus, because nobody's like Jesus. So let them really know Jesus. So that's going to help them, obviously. And to have them doctrinally, rationally centered on apologetics, that when their emotions go astray, what they might think is spiritual problem, they're going to be anchored. They're going to know there's no place they can go, because this thing is rock solidly true, and the evidence and the proof is just overwhelming. So you're stuck, you know. So deal with what you're dealing with and get through it. God will get you through it, but you can't leave. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. You know, it reminds me of a quote from, when it comes to these entertainment churches, like you were saying, you brought it up. It reminds me of a quote from Tozer. Tozer says, "A church that cannot worship must be entertained." And that's really what it comes down to, is that if they can't worship properly, you know, to the most holy and righteous God, then what it comes down to is that they have to be entertained. They have to go ahead and have the laser light shows. They have to have the big show on stage, and I've never been a big fan of that kind of thing. I mean, I think that it's just there needs to be a reverence within the church, you know. And when I see teachers like Stephen Verdict or any of the other, you know, Todd White or any other teachers out there that are just all there for the entertainment of making people feel better. Oh boy, I just, there's a part of me that just wants to get really angry about that kind of thing, and just it breaks my heart.
Imagine if Tozer was alive now. I mean, he said that it must have been the 50s or 60s or so, because he died in around 63.
Yeah.
Could you imagine if he saw what was going on now?
Right. Yeah, you're absolutely right. If he saw what today, or Spurgeon, I mean, if Spurgeon saw what was happening with today, I'll tell you, there would just be an incredible revival of if these guys were still alive, because they would just be just mowing down these type of churches and just exposing them for what they are. And sadly, it's just nowadays, it just seems like there's so many big name pastors that are just not teaching the word properly. You know, that's one of the things that I've always.
The Todd White guy is interesting, and I know he's got some people that have copied him, because what he's doing works as far as becoming a big social media star. Is they do the old leg thing still?
Yeah,
you know, the legs. I can't believe people still go for that.
They still fall for that. I know. They're just like, oh yeah, I'm making your leg grow, and it's like, no, you're not. You're just pushing the other one in.
I can't even believe it. It's like, come on. That has been debunked for 30 years in just common sense. It's just, but like you said, you know, the people just, you know, run for these errors. But go ahead. You were about to say something.
I lost my train of thought, so don't worry about
it. With your channel there on YouTube, Atomic Apologetics, I love that name. That must have been a God-given name. That's a powerful name, obviously. Who are you to reach?
I was going to say, it's actually a spin from my my username that I like to use, which is Atomic Glue. And my Twitter handle is Atomic Glue John, at Atomic Glue John. And Atomic Glue just basically is what I took of, because I just thought that was such a cool name. And there's a little background of it, where basically what it means is everything is made up of atoms. Okay, from the table you're sitting on, or in the chair that you're sitting on, to the car that you drive, everything is made up of atoms. And inside these little atoms, you got these protons and neutrons all packed tight inside. And so the issue is this, though, is what happens when you get two positive sides of a magnet? They push apart, right? Same thing should happen when it comes to your protons inside those atoms, and they don't. Right. And so scientists, you know, they for the longest time they couldn't figure out. It's like, well, what is it? What keeps them together? What keeps them from flying apart? And so they just called it atomic glue originally. I think nowadays it's called gluon, but if they decide, oh, okay, well, it's atomic glue. It's something that just keeps them from not flying apart. Now, here's the really cool thing. In Colossians 1:17, it says that he's before all things, and he being Jesus, and he keeps all things. He's before all things, and in him all things hold together.
I love that.
So Jesus Christ is holding all things together, even right down to our very atoms.
Wow.
Yeah. And that's why I always thought, it's like, and so that name Atomic Glue is something I've always wanted to remind myself of who's actually keeping all things together. You know, it's Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ is the atomic glue. Mm-hmm. And so anyways, so you were talking about the my YouTube channel.
Yeah, who you trying to reach, what type of people you're trying to reach and such.
Mostly, my target audience for that is actually other Christians. I want to encourage them to understand what apologetics is. I want them to be also entertained. I just want to be somewhat to be able to watch something and just maybe get a little chuckle on some of the stuff that's out there, the craziness of this world, you know, and to be able to teach apologetics to a lot of many people. So, I mean, I have various different playlists, but one of the things that I've been working on a lot is, for a while anyways, was The Narrow Mind by Pastor Gene Cook. If you remember Pastor Gene Cook, he actually had this internet radio show called The Narrow Mind. And so what happened was he actually released all his audio for it, for people to listen to it and such. And so a while ago, I was playing around with an audio program called Audacity, and you can actually make certain recordings sound better. And so by eliminating some of the background noises and, you know, just kind of adjusting some of the stuff that's the bass and treble and whatever else. And so, long story short, I was trying to improve some of the Greg Bahnsen debates and lectures. And so I was doing that originally, and I tried to contact the folks who have the rights for that and try to get permission from them to see if it's okay for me to release this stuff out to the public. And they actually took issue of it. So they said, no, we don't recommend you doing that. That's our property. You can't use that. I was like, okay, fine. So then along comes Gene Cook's Narrow Mind broadcast. And I decided, okay, well, I'll try that. And so I started messing around with it and just kind of editing it and making it sound better, getting rid of a lot of the hums and crackles and whatever else that's in the background from, you know, and these podcasts were back in 2003 to 2012, I think. So there's like many years of these podcasts that had some pretty not so great audio to it. So I've been trying to improve them and trying to get it sounding better and all that. So anyway, I contacted Gene Cook and I said, hey, you know, is it okay for me to do this where I can, you know, clean them up a little bit and then put them on my YouTube channel? And he's like, yeah, go for it. So he was like just totally cool with it. So I was really happy about that. And so I've been doing that now, where I've just been editing it down just a little bit, getting rid of some of the songs that he plays. That way I don't get a copyright strike on YouTube. And so I just been doing that off and on. And so there's probably, I think I have like 33 episodes of The Narrow Mind, along with a couple of his debates that he's done. And also he had another hour-long program called the Atheist Hour. And those are really fascinating to listen to, because he talks to atheists. And when you listen to that, boy, you just really get an understanding about apologetics and how he uses presuppositional apologetics. And he was a master at it. He was just so good at it. And so it's a really handy tool for people to listen in. And it's just audio, but you can listen to it on your YouTube channel. And so it's a lot of fun to listen to, and just kind of, and I got several people always making great comments saying that this is something I wish, I mean, I'm so glad that I can find these on the internet now, because no one knew about them for the longest time. So
yeah, anyway. I saw that on your channel, the remastered. It's a great work you're doing for that. It's too bad CCM didn't allow you to do it with Bahnsen, because it could really help a lot of people. When I think about Bahnsen's ministry, I wrote a book about him, his biography. I wonder how much money could they actually be making from him with their tapes and their CDs? Not much, as of 2019. So what do they have to lose if you said, okay, I'll remaster it, send it to you, get your approval, make sure it's how you like it, and then issue it to the public? But I guess I don't want to beat down any of our fellow brothers.
And I even offered it for free. I was like, I'll do this on my free time. I mean, it's like, I don't care. I mean, it's like, I want this stuff sounding really good. One of the, the great debate with Bonson and Stein, you know, we all know, we all heard how horrible the audio is on that. And it's so bad. And I took that debate and I took 10-minute segments and I just worked on those every 10 minutes. And, this is almost like a 2-hour debate, I think. And so I took 10 minutes of it at a time and just kind of cleaned them up and get the background cleaned up and all that, and just everything about it. I mean, I tried to clean it up as best I can, and it sounds just 10 times better than what it did. But unfortunately, I can't give that out because it's not my property. And so I have to respect that.
Yeah.
But
I think Christians, if there's something, especially you're really not making a lot of money at anymore because it's older material and such, I don't understand. I came across this on my first book I wrote in 2005. I was going to quote Keith Green. He was a musician from the 70s and 80s. He gave away all this stuff free. Okay, he says, you can write me if you want to see our CD or tape or books. We'll send them to you free. You can't afford the concert, come on in free. That was a big thrust of his ministry, right? So I wrote the folks that had his copyright and said, can I quote this one quote in my book? And they said no. So what I did, I framed their letter, their rejection letter, and then I put a quote of Keith Green about how he loved to give free things away and kept it in my office for years. Because it's really not about making money. I know there's a place for, a labor to be properly paid and so forth, but that's kind of sad to hear that. What's Gene Cook up to these days? Is he still doing ministry and such?
No, he's actually not. He kind of went a left turn, basically what he did, and not in a bad way. Not in a bad way. What I mean is, he went down another road where he got burnt out with apologetics and being a pastor. And I understand, that's his own personal life, and so he decided to go ahead and go down another road, which is he went down the road of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. So he's a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Basically, that's all he does. He just goes against. He goes on these tournaments, or either that he goes through these competitions, I guess, and he wins all these competitions, and you can find him. I think his handle is BJJ Moses. I guess that's what people call him.
That's a very interesting story. But you know what? Like you said, we can't judge his career path. One thing we can say is anybody could close their eyes for the last time on earth and open them heaven and be grateful for all the work that he has done in his life for the Lord and be satisfied when he goes to the throne on that, even though he obviously gets there by grace alone. So hats off to Gene Cook, although most of us are still probably a little sorrowful that he's still not doing apologetics because he was so good at it. Could you tell me a little bit about the council? Is that group still in place? Because a lot of good work there. What's going on with that?
Yeah, a little background with it was the Council of Google Plus is what it used to be called, but Google Plus now, obviously, as we all know, doesn't exist anymore. So we altered the name for it, called we dropped the Google Plus part. So now we're just called the Council. Basically, it started off with the Bible Thumping Wingnut. We were there for a while, and so we had a weekly podcast, not really a podcast, just a video YouTube channel kind of thing and all that. But I think we eventually did turn it into a podcast on the Bible Thumping Wingnut network. But we decided to go ahead and depart ways from them. We decided to go ahead and just kind of break off and just kind of do our own thing. And so what happened was we still kind of get together through Discord. Many of us do, but we rarely do we ever record something. If we do, we are trying to kind of get together and get some kind of weekly show going on YouTube, but it's just been kind of a difficult situation because of other people's schedules. And so it's been one of those kind of situations where we're just trying to figure out when's the best time to do it. I think we did agree on Saturday nights. We're trying to still work on that and see if that's a possibility. We are still very active though on Discord, along with Facebook group. We're on. Just look up the council on Facebook, and you should be able to find us there. And
well, I hope you guys can do more shows that are recorded, because there's a lot of us that, you'll be sitting there late at night drinking your chamomile tea, and you don't want to watch secular TV. You just want to kind of, mellow out and turn it on and listen for an hour, hour and a half or longer on some topics that really make a difference. And that's part of what the show did for folks that I know.
Yeah. We just kind of talked about whatever situations that are happening within the church, or either that, just talk about the apologetics or theology. Sometimes we'd bring in somebody from another faith, or either another an atheist or something, and just kind of chip away at their worldview, and just kind of talk to them and make sure that the gospel is shared with them. Also, it was a great, it's still a great group of guys who are just godly and very theologically astute, and I'm so appreciative of them all. I mean, they are just really amazing guys. We got Chris Harris, you got Brian Forbes, you got Josh Smith, you got, occasionally we have Tyler Vela from the Free Thinking podcast come in, and then and we also bring in Matt Slick sometimes, along with Andrew Rappaport, and it's just a great group of guys who just talk about certain situations, or either that, we talk about, sometimes we have a segment called the depravity of the week, where basically we just talk about whatever situation is happening in our world that is an absolute depravity, and so we just kind of expose what it is and try to look at it with the biblical worldview. And it's a great thing. We're still working on it. We'll hopefully we'll get them going fast pretty soon. So
I'll pray for that end and encourage you guys on that, because it really does edify a lot of folks. And that leads to my second last question. Out there's a lot of folks that were like you before you met Matt Slick, just kind of Christians, not seasoned apologists. They don't have the ability or the time perhaps to devote themselves to years of study like you've had, and they don't have the mentors that you had. What would you recommend to these believers on how they could really grow in their theology and apologetics?
There's probably several websites I would recommend. I would probably say, look, 'cause a lot of us just don't have the budget to actually get like some of these theology books or apologetics books. So you can learn so much through carm.org, or either that, you can go to strivingforeternity.org, or either at the YouTube channel, where Andrew Rappaport gives so many different lessons on everything from biblical hermeneutics to apologetics to interpretation of the Bible. He breaks down everything so wonderfully, and he's an amazing teacher to watch. Let's see, I would say for other websites, monergism.com is tons of resources that you can go to that have good, strong biblical teachings of really good old teachers from the greats, from Jonathan Edwards, or you can go down to Spurgeon and all that, and most of the stuff is free. If not, they'll usually give you a link of where you can buy it at, purchase that at a pretty good price. So monergism.com, great site to go to. And I would say, what else? If you are willing to spend some money, I mean, I would say just getting yourself a good systematic theology book. I have the Wayne Grudem book, Systematic Theology, and it comes in handy whenever I have a question about something, or if I'm unclear about a particular doctrine or a particular view. I crack open that book and I just start reading through it, and I just start figuring out, what's it about, and then I compare it with scripture, and and so you just I would recommend one of those kind of books to do. And also, if you want, Andrew Rappaport, again, I'm going to be plugging his stuff so much. He's got 2 books that you should check out. The first book he has is What Do They Believe? And so it's a great book when it talks about all the other religions out there: Mormonism, Judaism, Islam, and Jehovah's Witnesses. And basically it breaks down all the religions and basically teaches you, what they believe. And that way you're equipped whenever they come knocking on your door. Not that Muslims do, but but
I guess I shouldn't say that.
Yeah. Well, it's great because about a month ago, I actually had some Jehovah's Witnesses knock on my door, and I was so equipped from reading that book. I was just like, I knew exactly what they believe now. I knew what questions to ask. I knew how to steer that conversation towards the gospel, and it was such a handy tool to use when it comes to that for that book. The second book is what he has. It's called What Do We Believe? And so the first one was What Do They Believe? And then now the second one is What Do We Believe? And it really breaks down all the essentials of what the Christian should believe. And so it's very handy to have and all. So
that segues to our last question really good. First, if you could spell his name when you answer this question. But the last question is, all the things that you've learned over these years, and I know if you're like me, you learn a lot by talking to people from all different worldviews. What are some things you wish you knew when you first started your theological and apologetic approach that you now know that you didn't then? And could you spell Andrew's last name for us?
Yeah, Andrew Rappaport. Rappaport is Rappaport.
Okay, good.
Rappaport. And
Excellent.
So, yeah, and he's from the Striving for Eternity Ministries. So to answer your question, what was the things I wish I knew? I guess I wish I knew more with how to well, basically, how about this? I wish I was more tactful. I wish I knew how to approach certain situations with a little more patience, a little more love. Sometimes I kind of go in with a little too much snark, sometimes a little too much sarcasm, and the problem is with that. Many people probably take that a little too offensive. Sometimes they just go, why you got to disrespect me and all that. So, and I know that's sometimes my approach is going in there with a little bit of sarcasm or a little bit of snark, and I wish now I knew back then to just kind of hold back on that and not be as disrespectful in those ways. Sometimes sometimes I have to go back and apologize, and it's like, yeah, I'm sorry. I guess I was being
that's
a little.
A good word. That's a really good word, because I know that I've seen most young apologists, once they start getting some of these tools down, they just really go for the throat too quickly sometimes. And so that's a good word. And, on your YouTube channel, Atomic Apologetics, the channel is accessible, it's educational, and the tools that you give, especially like you said, with Gene Cook's information, with the council, with your own work, it really, really helps a lot of folks. Can you give our viewers your channel and the website information, and so how they could get a hold of your work?
Yeah, my particular channel is Atomic Apologetics on YouTube. You can find that, and you'll notice a little blue icon basically that says Atomic Apologetics. That's how you'll know you're on there, and so basically you'll be able to see the various different playlists that I have, the Narrow Mind Remastered along with the Council. I think I have various ones dating back for several years now, and then I have some other playlist that deals with Christian discernment along with exposing atheists, and so anyway, then there's also we actually have a blog. The council has a blog, and I believe it's Spirited Tech. Oh boy, let me see if I can find it. So I believe it is. Let's see if I can open it up. And
where are you looking for that? Do you have a donation button on your YouTube channel or any place? Are you taking donations, John?
No, not at all. I'm not. And all my stuff is something that I'm not looking for a profit or anything. I just want to go and get the gospel out, teach Christians about stuff. And so, I mean, if anything, I would say support Carm or support Matt Slick or Andrew Rappaport. Give them the money, because they're the ones who are actually boots on the ground, who are out there doing the Lord's work and all that. I'm just
such in the move,
yeah, especially that. So the website is spirited-tech.com/COG. I will have to just give that to you. That way you can maybe post it on the podcast or something. But
in the description when we post this on Facebook and YouTube.
Right. Yeah. And it's the council's blog. Sometimes I'll write something, but for the most part, the person who's actually writing the most is a guy we call the Sire, and he's also known as Vincent the Fake Greg Bonson. So that's his other name. And so, anyways, he's a fantastic young guy, and he's so incredibly smart. And he writes a lot of these great articles, and so I'll have to send the link to you, so that way you can check them out. And yeah, it's actually just a great thing. We have a lot of great articles, various topics when it comes to theology and apologetics and philosophy and such. And so, yeah, it's good stuff.
Well, I really appreciate the time, John, and my viewers and I thank you for that. We'll pray for your ministry, how you're affecting so many people from that. And hopefully we can get together again soon, because it's really a blessing to get to know you and to see, the real life behind the work that you're doing. So God richly bless you. Okay, my friend.
Thank you very much. It was really good meeting you too there, Mike. So, yeah.
God bless you, my friend.
Thank you.
Hey guys. You can really help us if you donate to our worldwide media outreach. Just go to our Patreon page at Mike Robinson Apologetics on Patreon, or click the donate button on our main page on YouTube and give as the Lord leads. Thank you so much.